And I've seen city government not work for the people of District 4.
For this particular position, the experience is what really matters.
Alex Pedersen and Shaun Scott beat out 8 other candidates in the fight to fill the Seattle City Council District 4 seat this fall. Who will voters in Northeast Seattle and Eastlake favor?
We don't want another regressive tax.
Both candidates weigh in.
We're going to have to make some real demands if we're serious about seeing real change.
The race to represent District 4.
What's your name?
Next on City Inside Out. Welcome to this edition of City Inside Out. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The residents of District 4 in Seattle have known they're getting a new council member for many months. After Rob Johnson left the job in April, and with the current council member, Abel Pacheco, not running for the position, the race for D4 has come down to Alex Pedersen and Shaun Scott. Peterson, a former legislative aide to past council president Tim Burgess, and Scott, a Democratic socialist and labor organizer, offer 2 very different approaches to voters in Northeast Seattle and Eastlake this fall.
It's really eye-opening to talk directly to thousands of people.
Alex Pedersen knows the race for City Council District 4 has a faster pace to it. Whomever voters choose will take office in November, not at the start of next year, like the other 6 council seats up for grabs.
It has been a very hard job.
That's the city's protocol, following council member Rob Johnson's departure from the D4 seat in April, and current council member Abel Pacheco's agreement not to run for the position.
I think that's why the person who wins this election needs to have lots of experience already so that they can hit the ground running.
Peterson was an aide to former council member and mayor Tim Burgess. Peterson also worked at the federal level with housing and urban development, and has served as a financial analyst for affordable housing projects.
So the federal government, local government, and private sector with an expertise in homelessness, which is people's #1 priority, I think that's a winning combination for me.
Peterson was a winner in the August primary. Up against 9 opponents, he earned more than 40% of the vote.
I'm running to bring more accountability to City Council.
He's endorsed by Seattle Firefighters Local 27, former King County Exec and Deputy Secretary of HUD, Ron Sims, and the Seattle Times.
I've doorbelled every block in my district.
As of late September, the Peterson campaign has raised more than $126,000, with 42% of that coming from Seattle's Democracy Voucher program.
Hi, how are you,
All right,
Alex?
nice to see you.
Political action committees, including Moms for Seattle, People for Seattle, led by Tim Burgess, and CASE, the Seattle Chamber's political arm, are also supporting Peterson's campaign with more than $67,000. The Civic Alliance for a Progressive Economy PAC has contributed less than $100 to support Peterson's challenger, Shaun Scott.
I think we're running very different campaigns.
Peterson says, if elected, he'd collaborate with city and county leaders to work on Seattle's homeless crisis and connect with D4 constituents and their concerns about everything from street crimes to upzones.
In local government, where we can deliver public safety, clean parks, safe streets, it really matters to get out and vote and look for somebody who's going to listen to you.
I'm Shaun. I'm running for City Council in this area.
Shaun Scott says he's fighting for some major reforms.
My key issues are really going to be about taking power back from some of the major corporations.
Scott, a labor organizer, Democratic socialist, and housing advocate and journalist for Real Change and other publications, says District 4 needs someone with his background.
To make sure that both renters and vulnerable homeowners, students, people of color, are really feeling like they're having their material needs reflected.
Scott earned more than 23% of the vote in the 10-way August primary race for District 4, 17 points behind Alex Pedersen.
What are some issues that are important to you as a voter?
He's endorsed by the King County Democrats, the Sierra Club, and the Stranger newspaper.
Our campaign is one that is building a very broad, progressive coalition.
As of late September, Scott has raised nearly $143,000 for his campaign, with nearly 3/4 of that coming from democracy vouchers.
We need more progressive revenue.
Scott, who has worked for the city's Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs, says he wants the city to start working for District 4. And he's pushing to invest more in public and social housing and environmental priorities like the Green New Deal.
A Green New Deal, Green New Deal.
It starts for me with the revenue question. And from getting more progressive revenue, we're going to be able to take action on these other issues like homelessness and climate justice and transit in the city of Seattle.
The race for District 4 offers some stark political differences between a candidate who says D4 needs his unique voice and a candidate who touts his public and private sector expertise.
For this particular position, the experience is what really matters.
Voters should vote for me because I'm actually one of them.
And here they are, the candidates for City Council District 4, Alex Pedersen, Shaun Scott. Thank you both very much for joining us. We had a coin flip before the show, I should say. Alex, you'll be speaking first. Tell us why you're running for this position and what type of leader are you going to be if you're elected?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having us. So I'm Alex Pedersen. I'm running for City Council to make our city government more accountable. So accountable to our communities and accountable for results. So I've listened to residents on every block in District 4, personally knocking on thousands of doors from Wedgwood to Wallingford to Eastlake. People really want a city council that's sensible, that listens, gets back to the basics, reduces homelessness. So after a master's degree in government, I worked for the Department of Housing and Urban Development during the Clinton administration. And in the private sector, I managed teams of financial analysts to preserve affordable housing. And as a city council analyst, I evaluated the complex city budgets that we have and advanced programs that work. So I've got that real experience getting results. And if I'm elected, I want to use that experience to benefit the 100,000 people of District 4.
Thank you very much for that. Shaun, why are you running? Let's talk about your leadership style too, please.
Right, I think that my leadership style would be defined by collaboration. If I'm fortunate enough to be elected this fall, it would actually be the second time that I would have been an employee of the City of Seattle. The first time I worked as the outreach coordinator for the Mayor's Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs as renovation of King Street Station and the transformation of that transit hub into an arts and culture center. And I think the focus group process that we undertook in order to stage that transition, where we were talking to dozens of stakeholders, everybody from arts writers to individual artists to gallery owners, speaks to the way that I would try to lead as the council member from District 4. We're facing some really, really big challenges that I think I have a unique skill set to address and alleviate as far as homelessness is concerned, as far as taking real robust action on climate justice here in the city of Seattle. So I'm running because I think that we need an organizer's perspective, a movement builder's perspective, to actually get us to a place where we're building the inclusive city that I think we say that we are before many.
Thank you very much. I'm going to dive into that homeless issue because I know you've been hearing a lot about this on the campaign trail. Every council candidate has. Alex, I noticed two parts of your platform online. You talk about preventing illegal camping in parks, preventing unauthorized encampments from returning. Two tall orders there. I want to talk about how you would accomplish that. What would you do differently than what the city's doing now, and would that require additional revenue to make it happen? However you want to tackle that.
Sure. Well, big picture, what we really need to do is work more collaboratively with King County. So I support the current approach from the mayor to work with King County because the behavioral health dollars flow through King County. So we need to collaborate with the county, create this regional authority, and focus on outcomes. And to adhere to the evidence-based strategies proven to reduce homelessness. My experience at HUD, I've seen homeless programs around the country. And so letting people camp anywhere is not humane, it's not a best practice. We need to bring people indoors.
Does this mean more sweeps, or what do you mean by that?
So the navigation teams that the mayor uses, which have social service workers, they make offers of housing and services. So we need to increase those connections so that we create trust, build a rapport with those people camping out near I-5 or in our parks so we can bring them inside. So more engagement gets more people inside.
And help me with the more revenue question. I know that a lot of different city studies have said we need more revenue. Even the county has said we need more revenue. Do we need more revenue? If so, how do we get it?
So it's likely that more revenue will be needed to build more permanent supportive housing and more public housing.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the federal government has cut
A lot of that. Yeah.
So, but I want to look first at the revenue we have. We have a $6.5 billion budget. It just grew when the mayor introduced it again. So we need to look carefully at our existing budget and be fiscally responsible too.
Okay, thank you very much. Shaun, I know part of your platform talks about making more investments in public and social housing. It's a
Right.
big part of your platform to help with homelessness and affordability. I want to know about that, but I also want to know about what do you do about those people camping out on the streets tonight? Help us with that broader look if you could, and if more revenue is needed to deal with this, where would you get that from if you would, please?
Right. Well, my opponent and I both went before the Seattle Times editorial board some months ago. My memory of it is that I was the only candidate to actually affirm not only that we needed more revenue, but that I was also going to be committed to identifying where those revenue streams might come from as far as addressing homelessness is concerned. Even the Chamber of Commerce in this race, which is not a, let's say, reliable source of progressive revenue solutions or suggestions, has said that we need to have a revenue commitment that's about double what we currently have if we're serious about addressing houselessness head on. I think that what we have seen in this country over the last 20 or 30 years is a massive civic disinvestment from affordable housing and social housing, a lot of that coming from budget cuts to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so what we have to do is get to a situation where cities, counties are stepping up to the plate and providing the funding that we need to get people inside with more supportive housing and providing more funds to frontline organizations that are doing great work around this topic.
And where do those funds come from? Are we talking about another head tax? Where are we here?
Well, I think that we don't want to place all of our eggs in one basket. I think that there was a recommendation of about 6 progressive taxes that the City Council made in the aftermath of the EHT, or excuse me, in the run-up to the passage of the EHT, and that's everything from a mansion sales tax to an excess compensation tax to other excise taxes perhaps on large estates and inheritances in the city of Seattle. So we don't want to place all of our eggs in one basket. At the same time, I am committed to making some of our largest corporations, which by the way have not endorsed me in this race, pay their fair share for some of the amenities that we need as a world-class city.
I want to make sure that I'm clear on this piece, because this head tax piece, I know that the council has repealed it, but it's come back a few different times. Is that something you support, Alex?
No, I feel that when it was proposed originally, that we need to bring funders to the table in an authentic way to actually work through how we're going to get more revenue. And I don't think the business community was brought to the table in an authentic way. I think there was a predetermined outcome. I see why the City Council came up with this, because property taxes have been rising. We don't want another regressive tax to burdening people, but to tax employment like that, I don't think is the best route.
And Shaun, when you talk about being collaborative, I think that's a concern. If you want to try to bring some of these bigger businesses who've got some money to the table here, how do you collaborate with them if you're saying we might be taxing you, things of that nature?
Well, it's definitely the case that from November of 2018 until the passage of the EHT in spring, from November 2017 to the passage of the EHT in spring of 2018, the city did have a pretty extensive focus group process, and big business was brought to the table. The unfortunate part of that reality was that when they didn't get the outcome that they liked, which would have been no tax, they attempted to flip the table over. And I think working people and renters, people in District 4 and beyond, understand that it's going to take a lot more than a Pollyannish attitude towards corporations that have a lot of power in the city, and that we're going to have to make some real demands if we're serious about seeing real change.
All right, thank you. That's an important distinction. I'm glad we broke it down. Shaun, going back to you here, talking about so-called safe injection sites, or CHELs, these community health engagement locations. Some background here. There is a safe syringe site in D4. As you know, it's in the U District, run by the People's Harm Reduction Alliance. The Alliance has said it would welcome a safe injection site there to help prevent overdoses. However, our local U.S. attorney says this would still be illegal. Would you support having a safe injection site in D4?
I would, and additionally, I support Councilmember Mosqueda and City Attorney Pete Holmes in saying that we could have a civic commitment to opening such a site in the face of withstanding a potential federal legal challenge. I think that the stakes for safe injection sites have to do with the fact that we've seen a very long, very destructive war on drugs in this country that has gone back 30, 35 years, where we treated people who needed treatment as actually needing punishment. And even the architects of that war on drugs, Bill Clinton's words about casting too wide a net with respect to our large prison population, leap to mind. So I think that we need to get to a place where at the city level, we're treating people who need treatment with treatment, and we're not going in the direction of failed policies like sweeps that waste $10 million a year or carceral solutions that don't get us any closer to addressing the root causes of houselessness and where houselessness intersects with addiction.
Got it. Alex, your thoughts. Would you support a safe injection site, a Chell in District 4?
So I would have major concerns with that. I think we all agree we want to help people, we want to reduce harm to them, and I think we need to use those dollars for treatment to actually move people along and help them. I've done research on this. I actually went up to the injection site in Vancouver, BC to see it myself, Insight, and looked at some studies. The results are mixed. We do, as you mentioned, have this legal challenge from the U.S. government. So I think we need to be focused on helping people with treatment, and I'd rather use that funding for that wiser investment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I want to talk about an issue both of these candidates actually agree on here. They actually co-signed a letter about this. They want to suspend the council's plan for upzones on University Way, better known as the Ave. Alex, I'll start with you. Now, I'm looking at the first item I'm seeing on your platform, affordability. To help on that front, Seattle needs new units in place immediately, if not 5 years ago. Why are you pushing back on this upzone idea?
Sure. So I support upzoning near fixed, reliable transit, and the U District much of it was upzoned already. The Ave is special, it's historic, and what people also might not know is there is affordable housing already on the Ave. So when you create an upzone, we have to be careful about the disruption and the real estate speculation that occurs, which sometimes can reduce affordability. Okay. So want to preserve those neighborhood businesses and that existing affordable housing.
Shaun, your thoughts on this? Another critique you'd hear from density supporters would be developments come to the U District anyway. If Seattle doesn't do some sort of upzone on the Ave, the developers wouldn't pay into Seattle's Affordable Housing Fund. Let's talk about that. Why make an exception for the Ave when clearly a lot more affordable housing is needed in D4 and throughout the city?
So I'm proud to be endorsed in this race not only by the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, but also by pretty much every environmental organization from the 43rd LD Environmental Caucus to the Sierra Club that has endorsed in this race. And part of the reason is because we recognize that more density, more affordable housing, more social housing, moreover, closer to where people work is a key component of our climate strategy in a city where most of our carbon emissions come from people driving single occupancy vehicles on their workaday commutes.
All right.
I think that zoning reform generally is actually a very, very big point of departure in this race between the two of us. I think that we need to see real reform with respect to changing the large swaths of our city that are devoted to single-family zoning. I think that the Ave, if we had had a broader commitment to zoning reform elsewhere through the city, we would be placing less of our bets and placing much less weight on trying to have upzones in the Ave get us all the housing that we need.
Okay.
I think that part of what's going on with the Ave is you have a lot of real estate speculators and developers who have not endorsed me in this race. They have gone the way of my opponent, who are interested in making over the city in ways that are not actually going to be inclusive and affordable to the people who need housing the most. So at the same time that I say we need to see zoning reform in some of our areas where we really have kind of suburbs within cities, I also think that the Ave represents an important exception because the kinds of upzoning that we're going to see there are not necessarily going to get us the social housing that I think we were told we were going to get as a result of that upzone.
Thank you for that. And I want to make sure I touched on an issue that Shaun just brought up here. Political Action Committee money is playing a role in many city council races. It's happening in D4 as well. Alex, you've got 3 PACs supporting your campaign with independent expenditures to the tune of $67,000 so far. I know there have been some negative ads too. I want to make sure that we clear the table on this. Your thoughts about PACs and how they're affecting this race?
Sure. So I'm really proud that I've collected the most democracy vouchers from residents in District 4. And I'm not taking any contributions directly from real estate developers, from any PAC, whether it's a union PAC or a business PAC or anything. So trying to maintain that independence. The independent expenditures are totally separate from the campaign. It's been a big disappointment to see them come in so heavy into these races. I think as we see today, we can speak for ourselves on the issues. I think negative ads have no place in the campaign. I support Councilmember Lorena Gonzalez's efforts to try to stem the flow of dollars from PACs. And again, we need to be out doorbelling, meeting with voters directly. That's what counts, and that's what I hope voters remember.
Okay. Shaun, your thoughts about this? I know the Civic Alliance for a Progressive Economy has supported your campaign with some expenditures, much less than with Alex's campaign with PACs. But your thoughts about the impacts PACs are having on this race and others?
I think we talk a lot in this race about accountability and not enough about integrity. I think that it's impossible to be a champion of neighborhoods in District 4 while at the same time being backed by some of the biggest corporate representatives of the corporate elite and real estate elite in the city that you can find. The corporate PACs that have backed my opponent back him because they think he is going to be a worthwhile vehicle for many of their interests.
Okay.
I was not the candidate who told the Downtown Seattle Association that condos were going to be a suitable answer to our affordability crisis. And so I think that voters really understand the sharp contrast as far as me being a campaign that has received the most democracy voucher citywide across the city in these city council races, and understanding that I'm actually going to be beholden to the same communities that have made my candidacy possible, and not by some pretty large interest groups that really look at Seattle as an investment and not as a place for people to live.
I feel like there may be a few rebuttals there. Alex, I wanted to give you the floor for a second.
Sure. I think that the important lesson here is that the endorsements that we've gotten, I'm endorsed by community leaders throughout District 4. District 4 is comprised of about 20 neighborhoods, and the community leaders have endorsed me throughout.
Okay.
So I think that they see that I'm an independent candidate, that I'm highly experienced, I care about the neighborhoods. One of my jobs when I was a city council aide was to go to all the community meetings, to answer all the constituent mail. So I care about my future constituents.
Thank you. I'm glad we went into that. I want to talk about a contentious issue for some residents in D4 regarding these bike lanes along 35th Avenue Northeast. These lanes were included in Seattle's bicycle master plan 5 years ago. Some neighbors didn't want them when this redesign of the avenue was underway. Big pushback. Now this plan for bike lanes abandoned. I think there are some differences between your platforms on this. Shaun, I'll have you jump in first. If you were elected, would you try to bring back bike lanes, or what are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think that the voters have spoken pretty clearly in passing the Move Seattle levy and having representatives that stood behind our climate action plan in the city of Seattle. And I think that bike lanes represent, along with other forms of transportation as far as light rail, and as far as more walkable and pedestrian and disabled accessible streets, a real way where we can create a city where people are encouraged to explore our city outside of cars and on foot. The climate crisis is real. We have a Sierra Club endorsement, a Seattle Subway endorsement, a Transit Writers Union endorsement in this race because we have been clear-eyed about that fact from the beginning of this race. And we recognize that this is an issue where it's going to be very difficult for us to achieve the change that we need by sort of painting around the edges and nipping and tucking here and there. So I'm proud to stand with the youth climate strikers. I've attended many Friday youth climate strikes, and I think our support for bike lanes goes hand in glove with our support for the young people, organizers across the country who have pushed for a Seattle Green New Deal both nationally and, of course, locally.
Alex, your thoughts about this? This was a very contentious issue in that neighborhood, a lot of different sides pitted against each other. Your thoughts about what happened in the aftermath of this?
Sure. So I think the theme was the lack of transparency coming from the city government. And people felt in the community, I knocked on the doors throughout Wedgwood and Bryant, and people felt like they hadn't been listened to. And they felt that there were other things going on 35th Avenue that were important to them, lots of faith communities, the library, businesses. And so I believe in an interconnected bike network, that we should have that. I think that the details matter, that we have to, even the Bicycle Master Plan says we do need to re-engage with communities to find out what makes sense for everybody, to collaborate with our constituents and make sure we harmonize the different ideas. And that may end up being a greenway on a side street instead of on an arterial. And that's okay as long as we're connecting the network.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I wonder if we can do the 30-second version here. That one issue that we haven't talked about today that maybe needs some more visibility you've heard out on the campaign trail. Shaun, any thoughts there?
I would have to say that in the citywide discourse around these council races, we haven't talked enough about childcare and affordable childcare options generally. We have really a childcare crisis in the city of Seattle where many families in District 4 are paying as much for childcare per month as they are by rent, per rent, or for rent. And so we have a situation where Childcare facilities are illegal in much of the city as a result of the restrictive zoning code that I was referencing earlier. So I think that with land use and funding being the two main levers of power that the city council has to make lives better in the city of Seattle, we have to look at comprehensive zoning reform that's going to get us to a place where more childcare facilities will actually be legal to be constructed and built throughout the city.
Thanks. Try to keep it short if you can, Alex.
Sure.
Yeah.
So as a parent, I get the childcare challenges that our city has, and I worked on the Seattle Preschool Program, which is a nationally acclaimed program, evidence-based, works. The children who come out of that program have great life outcomes. So, but homelessness is the number one issue that we hear about at the doors by far.
Okay.
And so I think we need somebody experienced to reduce homelessness.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Time for a closing statement. Alex, your final thoughts here. Why should voters support you, please?
Sure. So I believe many people have lost faith in City Hall throughout our district, and the listening is very important. So I've listened to residents on every block in the district, and again, they want a sensible city council that gets back to the basics. And I believe that if we have greater accountability, we can rebuild that trust with our city government and do great things so that everybody can afford to stay in the city we love. I'm proud of my broad coalition of endorsements from labor unions, environmentalists, community leaders, local businesses, from firefighters to Seattle Times to Ron Sims.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You get the last word, Shaun.
I think that voters in the District 4 race, as with I think the city council races generally, need to take a hard look at the candidates that they feel are going to help advance the ball as far as some of the recent progressive gains that we have seen progressive communities win. In the face of some very staunch opposition from the Chamber of Commerce and other very big groups in the city. We have seen secure scheduling, we've seen a $15 an hour minimum wage, we've seen action on a domestic workers' bill of rights, and I think those represent really some of the great gains for working people and vulnerable groups in the city. We can have more. We can have a Seattle Green New Deal, we can have a freelancers' bill of rights, which I've called for in this campaign, we can have a recommitment to social housing and supportive housing services in this city. But it's going to take making sure that we have a council that is very clear-eyed and very unabashed in their support for progressive reforms and gains that are going to make the lives of people materially better in this city.
Okay, thank you both very much, and we will be right back.
I think homelessness is growing.
I think that we need to find a humane way of dealing with the problem.
Really, what is the root cause of it, and what does the city need to do to kind of work it out?
It's getting crowded during rush hour. That's probably the bigger thing.
I'd like to see a lot more fairness in how we distribute the wealth within the city.
We'd like to know what you think. Send us an email at contact@seattlechannel.org or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Before we close today, it's time for our weekly CIO poll. What's your chief concern in District 4? Homelessness, affordability, transportation, or something else? We want to know what you think. Cast your vote and weigh in with your comments at our website, seattlechannel.org/cityinsideout. While you're there, you can watch our programs online anytime. Coming up next week, our election coverage continues with Council District 5. Incumbent Deborah Juarez faces challenger Ann Davison-Sattler in the race to represent North Seattle for the next 4 years. Watch them debate right here next time on City Inside Out. I hope you join us.